What are we talking about? Well, I'll tell you what we're talking about. It's the time for the recap. Welcome to Zarnia for Games and Geekery. This is our actual play D&D game. This game is set in the world of Storm's Eye. Well, it's not so much a world as the end of worlds. Storm's Eye is the center of a great storm. A storm so vast that it crosses across planes, worlds, dimensions, and it tears parts of those worlds out and takes it with them. In Storm's Eye, you will find pirates from one age, airships from another, a world torn apart and remade together on the edge of destruction. Because if there's one thing certain about Storm's Eye, it's that everything will be destroyed eventually. The islands will swirl into the middle where they will be crushed and destroyed. Whether it takes a year, 100 years, or 1,000 years, in Storm's Eye, nothing lasts. But perhaps things can change. We have 6 individuals who are going to tell their stories set in Storm's Eye, which may change the very fate of the storm itself. Last week, our adventurers met on a ferry bound for a small island of Crumb. They dodged an assassination attempt and arrived to find a small, sleepy place and try and explain away the 2 dead bodies that they had brought with them. However, at that time, in the midst of that explanation, fire broke out, and they charged in to help, only to discover fire imps were dancing around, setting fire to everything that they could find. They managed to kill the imps and tame the blaze, but the salvageable bookstore was pretty much destroyed. Just before, though, a figure emerged carrying the unconscious body of Iggy's friend, Moontree. In our last encounter, the newly formed team helped to put out the raging fires. Unfortunately, Iggy's friend Moontree was unconscious. Golden Dwayne, the knight that's too good to be true, seemed to infer that he was under some sort of curse. After some inquiries, it was determined that Golden Dwayne really did know nothing. Ignatius's father, Iggy's father, Johannes Kelderkoning, told them not to leave town, and instead they moved over to the Haystack Inn, where they could find lodgings for the evening. Once there, Jack began her investigations into the disappearance of her friend Piecrust, and Iggy interrogated a penguin person while having his first beer, Yayaka. Yayaka told him that the only place that he'd heard of the Infinite Library was from the ghost up on the ruins. Meanwhile, Thrastock had a confrontation with his paladin pal Goron, and things did not go well. That night, Makanda felt a strange pull towards the ruins, some kind of magical feeling. Jax had a strange dream about her lost home, and Glenda's knitting needle started shifting like a compass. The next day, they headed to the ruins to investigate, but they could find no opening except for a mysterious door, which seemed very unopenable. But they were left with many, many questions. Questions like,
what powerful magic is at work upon this island?
What did my dream mean?
Why were people trying to kill me?
Will Moontree be okay?
Where can one get sherry in the morning?
On our last episode, the party was investigating the ruins, but they could find no way into the Infinite Library from there. So they traveled down to Moontree's home, had to strip off to enter the to enter the arboreal abode and have a chat with Moontree. Moontree had awoken from his curse, but he was in a much worse condition. He had aged visibly and his skin was turning to ash and flaking away, much like the burnt pages of the book. Iggy devised a plan with Moontree for him to sneak out and rendezvous with them a little bit further away, out of sight of Moontree's parents. They then returned to the ruins and couldn't figure out quite how to open them until the sun dipped below the horizon and a ghost manifested. The ghost, seeing that they were able to open the door to the Infinite Library, immediately attacked them. The heroes did a mighty job, especially Legacy and Thrastok, at attacking the ghost. However, before it was vanquished, it released its horrifying visage, and Thrastok and Legacy, the ones who had hurt it the most, both visibly aged decades. Thrastok gaining an extra 40 years, and Legacy at 30 years. They entered the Infinite Library, where they were greeted by Loesti the Wise! Loesti the Wise! A wizard who had been transformed into a child by his own experimentation, and his golem sidekick, Sherwin. They advised the party on the nature of the Infinite Library, but warned them that they would have to pass a trial if they were to gain access to the possibilities of the library. Loesti the Wise also managed to reverse Thrastok's curse, overshot Legacy's a little bit, making him now a 20-year-old man. Barely a man, barely a woman. Yes. They then retired to rest, only parting with Sherwin's ominous warning that Loesti enjoyed games.
Who doesn't?
Who indeed? Let's recap what we had going on in our last episode, episode 4. Searching for a cure for Moontree's curse. Our 6 heroes fought the monks of the Infinite Library and defeated them. However, Loesti the Wise would only allow them to request a book if they killed the monks. While 5 of the heroes were debating, Thrastok was the only one who stuck true to his principles and refused to participate and walked out, discovering that it was a test of mercy. He was allowed alone of the team to request a book, and he summoned the Book of Binding and Breaking, which Moontree had wanted. But sensing its evil, he opted instead to smite it. The book was torn in half. Moontree screamed, but managed, with a bit of magic, to tear a hole from the Infinite Library's dimension and escape into the real world, leaving our 6 adventurers trapped in the Infinite Library without any way out, except through the Books of Might, which is guarded by the Bookworm. In our previous episode, our 6 heroes, who still don't have a team name of any sort yet, I really should probably start working on one.
Buckets.
Nope.
The Buckets. All right, our Bucket heroes. The Brotherhood of Buckets.
The Buccaneers.
I like Buccaneers.
Buccaneers.
Yeah, that's good.
The Buccaneers.
Buccaneers.
Oh dear.
Yes.
This is going to stick.
Escaped the Infinite Library through the Books of Might, managing narrowly to escape being devoured by the bookworm. Iggy was in fact swallowed, but managed to wriggle his way out, losing his precious cloak in doing so. Makanda managed quick-witted... Makanda managed to keep his wits about him and used the vortexes of possibility to draw forth 2 books. Everyone else, unfortunately, did not manage. However, at the very end, they all were hustled to safety as Thrastok kept the portal open before leaping through himself. Totes adorable. All right, so last episode, what happened was that you escaped from the Infinite Library back onto the island of Crumb. You made your way through the mines of the mountains out and reconvened at the haystack, where you found where Iggy and Jack discovered Pycrust's hidden letter, where Pycrust told them that he had stolen the book from the obsidian ring. They were after him, and he'd thrown the book into the sea. Bringing the team together, Legacy confessed to his rocky relationship with the authorities, and the team decided to evade Inspector Kinga, Captain Kinga, and make their way off the island of Crumb by convincing an Aarakocra to row them from Crumb to Samat in exchange for a pair of shoes, a jacket, and a tie, I think. I may be a bit hazy on those details. Arriving on Samat, the Aarakocra Yalada was very richly rewarded by Glenda with a wonderful throw or shore, like a moo-moo, like very brightly colored though, beautiful. And he promised that if they ever needed anything from any of the Aarakocra, that they just needed to say his name to them. They arrived on the island of Samat, and Jack led them to Irene's garden, a wonderful little oasis in the shady side of Samat City. There, Irene recognized the Book of Binding and Breaking that Makanda had brought with them. It was a book of an old friend of hers, Iggy's mother. Last episode, our team of Bucketeers sat down in a wonderful, warm sitting room with cups of tea, and were told a horrible story about how Iggy's mother lost her soul, and her and Irene ran scams by creating the Titans and the monsters they faced, culminating in the Battle of the Kraken at Daleport, where many hundreds of Daleport citizens were killed. Irene bearing a lot of guilt for that. Of course, there were a lot of questions from the whole party, especially from Iggy, who was given a letter which he has not yet read. While most of them went to bed, Jack snuck away in the night, being quite hurt about being excluded from Irene's life in such a big way. As she was wandering the streets at night, she realized that she was being followed. She turned the tables and got the jump on Jaggy Muckrak, a Gutterkin who was quite an asshole. Interrogating him for a brief and very awkward fight, he confessed that he was watching them because he was working for the Obsidian Ring. After that fight, he ran off into the night. The next day, the group came back together and headed up to the rock formation, the Eagle's Wing, where they searched for traces of the unbreakable armory. They found nothing, only a sheer cliff, unnaturally sheer. Looking down, they surmised that perhaps the location of the unbreakable armory was somewhere underwater. Looking out to sea, though, they saw a large ship, and on that ship, familiar shape of a zeppelin that they had seen over the Infinite Library on Crumb. In our previous episode, our unlucky heroes visited the Aarakocra village on the sides of the cliff to investigate, to continue their search for the unbreakable armory. They suspected that it was somewhere in the bay, and perhaps the Aarakocra could help them. When they arrived, they discovered that the Aarakocra were busy with a funeral. Speaking to an older Menguin, it was revealed that there had been a series of shark attacks ever since the ship just off the coast had arrived. Investigating further, they made contact with Shala Da, the shaman of the village. She revealed to Glenda that there had been 70 years ago a monk in the water carrying a child. It must have been her. So they knew that the entrance to the unbreakable armory was somewhere nearby in the water. With a little bit of magic, they were able to breathe water, and they went on a mission to find the unbreakable armory and also to rid the area of whatever it was attacking the Aarakocra in the kelp forest. Finding the submerged ruins, they saw divers busy excavating it, taking it to a cage that was chained, linked up to the ship above. Just before they could confront them, they were attacked by Sohwin in the waters. It was a bloody battle. Legacy was severely hurt, and no one would heal him because he's been an asshole. But they managed to fight them off, and Glenda took the drastic action of damaging the divers' air pumps.
But I'm the asshole, apparently.
Correct.
Room for more than one. I'm saying. Wow.
Pressed for time, the companions leapt through the portal. In our previous episode, the companions traveled through a portal into the unbreakable armory. But instead of finding the armory, they found twisted versions of their memories. Escaping these, they entered the true armory, empty except for the morbid decoration of decapitated goblin heads hanging from the ceiling. Ignoring this dire warning, they began to explore, eventually finding the forge, which was littered with bodies. Stepping in to investigate, they woke guardians and were attacked. After a desperate fight, they managed to shut down the forge and its protectors, and they discovered a magical hammer labeled Soul Taker. But they didn't find their companions, Makanda or Glenda. On our previous episode, Thrastock, Legacy, Jack, and Iggy continued to search the unbreakable armory, and they discovered the body of Kona Thrice Bearded. Using the magic of the Soul Taker hammer and the forge, they were able to restore Kona's soul to his body. He awakened as though he had just died in that battle, and the years that had passed since then were just a blink of the eye. Meanwhile, Glenda confronted a monk in her memories. This monk, though, turned out to be her mother. They reconnected, they spoke, but unfortunately, because Upsha had created the dream trap from her soul, the only way that she could release everyone was by dying. However, she did tell Glenda an important secret about who her father actually was. A former apprentice of the Five Temples, Yegoriel. The same Yegoriel who Kona Thrice Bearded named as the invader and traitor, the one who had destroyed the unbreakable armory. Meanwhile, Makanda, trapped in his own memories of being a humiliated scholar, is approached by a strange figure and offered any answers that he can the answer to any question that he cares to write in the book of Binding and Breaking. The mysterious fellow scholar calls himself Yegoriel. On our previous episode, the party was reunited.
And it felt so good. Sorry.
The party had saved Kona Thrice-Bearded and taken him to the infirmary, where they healed him up and discussed more details, drawing out of him what happened with Yegoriel, what his motivations might be, and such like. Glenda and Thrastok led a ceremony to commemorate Upsha's life. Jack and Iggy switched on the generator for the Unbreakable Armory, powering up everything. Everyone took a rest where Jack reconnected via the dream realm to her family, and Makanda consulted with Yegoriel through the book of Binding and Breaking. At breakfast the following day, a gong rang out, warning that intruders had entered the Unbreakable Armory. Everyone rushed to the forge, Kona insisting that it needed to be destroyed to stop it falling into the wrong hands. And from the door, a knocking. And then it bursts open. In our previous episode, after getting Kona back from the dead and restarting the generator that powered the whole of the Unbreakable Armory, the team broke away, discussed various things. They held a vigil for Glenda's mother, Upsha, and Makanda seemed to continue down his path of striking a strange deal with Yegoriel.
What?
Just when things looked dire for Makanda, as though he was about to be revealed and challenged on his chicanery, intruders arrived at the Unbreakable Armory. Kona and the party rushed to defend the forge, Kona insisting that it needed to be destroyed lest it fall into the wrong hands, and the rest of the party defending against the acolytes of Silvertongue, which included Moontree. They managed to beat back the acolytes, killing one and taking one of them prisoner while the others fled. They regrouped, interrogating the captured acolyte, Gib, who seems less than trustworthy, and challenging Makanda on his double dealings. Things have gotten tense since last episode, when Makanda betrayed the party, stole the Book of Binding and Breaking, exited the Unbreakable Armory, and delivered it straight to Silvertongue. It didn't work out quite as planned, though, as he was separated from the book. He didn't get to speak to Silvertongue, and instead he was imprisoned along with the Gutter King in the bowels of the ship. Using cunning and sneaky magic, he managed to exit his prison cell and arrived just in time to see the rest of the party, who had gathered their forces on the other side within the Unbreakable Armory, set an explosive to detonate and destroy it, and then leapt through the portal into a waiting net where they were attacked by the forces of the Obsidian Ring. During the battle, their cunning use of fog and mist and misdirection allowed them to best their opponents. However, Kona Thrice-Bearded was trapped in a crystal prison, and the mysterious airship, along with Silvertongue and Moontree, escaped with the entrance to the Unbreakable Armory. Wow. Okay.
Hello, calm down, Satan.
Dark. Is this party an evil party or a good party with Thrastok trying desperately to get them on the side of goodness? All right. In our previous episode, we began with with Makanda confessing to his true motives of why he had stolen the Book of Binding and Breaking and made off with it himself. This was quite a fraught conversation, especially because at that same time, the boat began to sink. The ship began to sink beneath the water. They hurried to save the Gutterkin who were held on board and salvage as many clues as they could from the ship. Gib tried to escape on a boat, but was chased down with Jack, who became a shark, and left onto the ship to fend for himself. Last seen kicking away across the waves. Will
That's
he ever be
always
seen
to
again?
traitors.
All right. And Makanda and the team had come together. They had confessed. They had shared information about what was going on. Makanda revealing that his son had been turned into a vampire by the Lord of Redrees, Orogoth, the vampire lord. This was a bit of a stick in the works because there's a lot on the plate of the team right now, but they came together and they swore to work together as a fist, a bucket fist.
Bucket fist.
All right, so bucket fist, ready?
Yeah, ready. Oh.
In our previous episode, there was a lot of talking, a lot of confessions as you went from the Arakroka village back into the town of Samat to try and find your way to Port Dale on Dalakos, where all the clues seemed to be pointing. But once you were in town, you found more clues that pointed you towards the crumpled lady. Pycrust confessed that he had stolen the Book of Binding and Breaking from the crumpled lady, betraying her. Not only that, he had discovered who she was, and he told Jack, revealing that it was none other than Lady Jassifer Mistwater, the strange, reclusive lady who lives on the top of the hill in the old, rundown mansion. Making your way to Mistwater Manor, you found the gate broken open. Sneaking forward, Jack and Iggy, through the bushes, saw exiting the manor Kinga Scarpcreeper, Captain Kinga Scarpcreeper of the Watch, leading an old lady between two deputies with another third deputy bringing up the rear. As yet, they have been undiscovered. They are stealthy and ahead of the rest. Iggy, what do you want to do? So, in our previous episode, it was revealed by Pycrust that the crumpled lady whom he had betrayed was Jassifer Mistwater. The team proceeded to Mistwater Manor to confront her, but when they arrived, they discovered that she was being arrested by the captain of the watch, Kinga Scarpcreeper, and some backup. They confronted Kinga, and a fight ensued, and during the fight, someone was killed. What seemed at first to be a constable, but when the disguise dropped, it was Silvertongue. Iggy, who was Silvertongue?
Silvertongue was one of Yegoriel's lieutenants, someone who had evil intentions and who happened to be my mother. Corrupted by the Book of Binding and Breaking, soul magic coursing through her veins, she became a thrall to Yegoriel.
You have all you've all now entered inside Mistwater Manor, where you're talking frankly with Jassifer Mistwater. You have captured Kinga and one of the other constables, and you have a body or two that she has said that she will dispose of for you nudge, nudge, wink, wink. We also know that Legacy in particular is wanted in connection to the murders on the ferry. On our previous episode, the team dealt with the aftermath of capturing Kinga and the death of Silvertongue.
Not the team, just one guy.
The constable was executed, but Kinga was kept alive as a useful asset for the future. Then their plans were interrupted by the scent of smoke on the wind. They rushed to Irene's house, which was on fire. Inside, Thrastock and Jack rescued Irene from the blaze, and she told them that Jaggy Muckrak was responsible. Meanwhile, in the crowd, Iggy asked a suspicious-looking Jaggy Muckrak what was going on. Jaggy stabbed him, and then the watch got involved, and Legacy and Iggy ended up running away with the watch in hot pursuit, while the rest of the team, with Irene, commandeered Jaggy, who was tied up at this point, and decided to make off into the crowd. Have I summarized that correctly?
We did get away.
What?
We got away.
You did get away. Right, and now for the recap.
Here we go.
In our previous episode, Randall Tumblewind made his first appearance, contacting Legacy Falconer and Iggy Kelderquinning when they were holed up at Legacy's apartment. He offered to help them bring down the corrupt forces that had taken control of the Watch of Samat. But he needed help. Iggy and Legacy directed him to Kinga's logbook, a book full of blackmail material that Kinga had kept on all the other conspirators. Randall went to go retrieve it and meet them later at the Chuckling Ogre. The party then reconvened, headed over there, and indeed, Randall had made good and brought the logbook with him. Meeting in a back room, they went over the material, shocked at the depth and detail that Kinga had kept. But they were interrupted by a thump on the door and the sound of something heavy sliding down it, and then blood seeping underneath. That is where you all are, in a small back room of the Chuckling Ogre. Green carpets, red blood. What would you like to do?
Head for the door.
All right, are you going to open the door?
Head for the window.
Draw my sword and head for the door.
All right.
Is there a window?
There's a window, I'm sure.
Oh my.
I'll pull the
All
door
right,
open.
you pull the door open. Standing in front of the door, holding a sword, dripping with blood, is a constable of the watch. He is smiling. You recognize this watch constable as Caleb. His smile does not reach his eyes. They are empty, blank. Guess what? Court is now in session.
Oh, damn.
Din, din, din,
In our
din.
previous episode, the party started a bit of a revolution. The party faced Caleb and a couple of watchmen, with Caleb, who was the creepy one with blanketness behind his eyes. Well, you don't actually know what he was up to because before he could say anything, he got stabbed in the face and turned into a pile of goo, which then attacked the party and got smashed by Thrastock, while Iggy led the escape through the window where they met Moontree, who escaped because this party has definitely haven't calculated just how hard you all hit. Definitely need to adjust that a little bit. Anyway, Caleb had killed Chuckle Devilbones, the proprietor of the Chuckling Ogre, a beloved figure in the underworld of the city. Thrastock turned this to his advantage, leading a sort of impromptu revolution against the corrupt watch through the streets of Samat, aided by Legacy and Randall Tumblewind, who had been investigating the corruption. They went all the way to the watch itself, the officers guarding it throwing down their weapons and handing themselves over. They've marched through the halls into the magistrate's office, into the courtroom of Magistrate Funungus, whose name appeared many times in the book of corrupt officers. They accused him, they exchanged words, but Funungus began laughing, leapt onto the desk, raised a gavel that grew 100 times its size, and attacked. And I'm sure there's quite a lot of vengeance that needs to be going around. Let's just recap our last episode. It was revolutionary times in Samat. So basically, after the killing of Chuckle Devilbones, Thrastock and Legacy led an uprising through the streets of the city that culminated in a battle in the Magistrate's Court, the kind of heart of corruption, where they faced down Magistrate Funungus, who, it turns out, had made some kind of pact with Yegoriel and had all kinds of dark magical powers that he tried to deploy against our team, but without much success. He was slain, but they got him talking again with a little help from Makunda's Speak to the Dead magic. Thrastock, wanting no part of this, marched the revolution up the road to go knock on the doors of the council chamber. But while interrogating Magistrate Funungus, they were interrupted by the man himself, Yegoriel, who promised to basically hunt them down and kill them all as soon as he got his torment engine up and running. Thrastock, meanwhile, on the higher streets, looked down on the bay and saw 3 frigates entering. One bearing the flagship, one of them bearing the giant banner of the Chain of Peace. It was the flagship of the Navy. Bum, bum, bum. Basically, the 3 ships in the harbor of Samat turned out to be carrying not only Hyde Gromar, but also General Ford Falconer himself, Legacy's father. Thrastock put a hold on the revolution to speak directly with the general. The team boarded the ship and were met by a smiling and very smarmy Hyde Gromar, welcoming back his long-lost brother.
Not brother.
Brother, not brother. They had an audience with Hyde and then escalated the matter to General Falconer, who was rather unsympathetic to his wayward son's entreaties and accusations that Hyde was working with the Obsidian Ring. They left the ship with 24 hours to solve the problem of Samat before the Marines would take over. On their way out, they were joined by a brother of the Salvite Inquisition, Brother Dinalesh, who claimed that they had a common enemy in Hyde Gromar. They began to investigate the warehouse on the dock, the one that supposedly the Obsidian Ring was working out of. They found it quite abandoned, apart from some statues, which began to move.
In the game,
We're not even friends with Legacy.
Oh! Anyway, if you're done setting yourself on fire, let's move on. In our previous episode, everyone had a long rest. That is the key takeaway.
Yes,
Everyone
thank you.
except for Iggy. Where were they having this long rest? In the very headquarters of the Obsidian Ring in Samat. They found it completely abandoned, except for a note left for Iggy. Iggy unfolded the note, scanned through it, and realized it was a ritual for summoning a familiar. The rest of the team were insistent that he not cast the spell. He agreed not to. Everyone else went to bed, except for Jack. But With a little bit of stinky fish rolling, he managed to elude even Jack's heightened senses in the dark. He found a basement and he cast the spell and summoned a narcoleptic chihuahua who spoke to him in the voice of his mother, Susanna Keldekonen, aka Silvertongue. He returned to the rest of the party and he was confronted by Thrastock, but managed to convince Thrastock for the moment to stay his blade and hear what the Chihuahua had to say. Okay, so where did we leave off last episode? So, the party left the revolution of Samat in the hands of Randall Tumblewind. He had brother Dinalesh as hostage, and he was also going to delay negotiations as much as possible with Hyde Gromar in order to keep him in Samat and off the trail of what the party was up to. And what indeed were the party up to? They were headed to Port Dale to get evidence that Hyde Gromar was part of the Obsidian Ring. No, not just part of the Obsidian Ring, was the head of the Obsidian Ring. If they could present that to Legacy's father, well then, Hyde would be in a lot of trouble.
Get a hiding.
Yes, he might have to go into hiding. He might have to hide. You gotta watch his hide. I don't know.
His father will tan his hide.
These are
Oh.
such common.
And you didn't
Okay,
think of
well,
any
you
of
know what?
Not a single one. It's a weird, it's a real build.
You know, just rude, okay? Shit. All right. To get to Port Dale, though, they had a bit of a conundrum. How to get there? The answer lay in Makunda's contacts. Redrees had a network of teleportation walls to cross across the whole archipelago. I don't know. I have trouble saying the word archipelago. It just sounds weird to me.
Archipelago?
Archipelago.
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 I don't know what's right anymore. Who knows? Anyway,
I say archipelago.
Archipelago.
they bluffed their way through the network of doorways, but there was a letter left for Makunda at each of them. He has not read it yet. The party were headed to Port Dale to look for evidence that Hyde Gromar was head of the Obsidian Ring to present to Legacy's father. They traveled through the Red Rees networks, arrived on a wonderful vineyard farm, and traveled into town. They were going to infiltrate the library, and they did so using stealth, conniving lies, and also a bath to get past security.
There was also hitting people over the head.
And there was also bopping people on the head. A couple of people got bopped on the head as they broke in after hours, hid people around the stacks. And just before the end of the episode, they were busy making their way to the next floor when they heard voices above them, and they ran down to hide in the floor below through a set of banded steel doors. When the doors shut behind them, they heard a voice crying out from a light at the end of the hallway. Hyde, is that you? There was a little bit of a battle. You see, what happened was the group were infiltrating the library where they were searching for information or evidence against Hyde Gromar to present to General Falconer. They got a little bit sidetracked, going down into the basement where they met the once queen, grandmother to Hyde. Iggy, thinking quickly, donned the face of Hyde and introduced the companions as allies to try and draw out the plans of the Dalekos royalty. They learnt a little bit of information, but they were going to learn more. As the once queen was showing them to the elevator to take them up to the rest of the tower, she turned on them, setting her golem guards against them. A fight ensued, but with a little bit of quick thinking and a nifty misty step, they managed to subdue the once queen and make her surrender the guards. In fact, they killed her, but they brought her back really quickly. So, you know, there it is. She revealed... Yes?
Can I just go on the record and point out that Hyde is, of course, Legacy's brother?
Hyde what?
Hyde is Legacy's brother.
Oh,
Can I
Hyde
just go
is
on the
Legacy's
record
brother,
and
yes.
Remind
It
everyone.
can't be
it's
on the
important
record
fact.
because it's not true. He's not my brother.
Speaking of, that was what gave them away. Hyde Gromar had sent a message telepathically to his grandmother, letting her know that the plan to assassinate General Falconer had been carried out, and that everyone had seen Legacy doing it.